Hello and welcome to another tutorial. Today I'll be showing you how to make a serum patch which can be utilized as a bass and as a lead. So these are the sounds that we'll be making today. This is the bass. And this is the leads. Just a reminder, I have serum presets and samples available in the description, and all the sounds featured in this video are from my packs. I will include a free download link to the patches I make in this video, as well as an empty Ableton instrument rack which I use for bass processing. And please don't forget to like and subscribe, as it helps the channel out enormously. We're going to start by making the bass, and then I'll talk about the lead later. Like many grime sounds, this is inspired by the classic gliding squares preset, but this time we'll be utilizing pitch modulation to add another element of interest to the sound. We'll create a new MIDI channel and bring in a new instance of Serum. We'll turn it down to avoid any clipping. Color code it and rename it to Grime Kick Bass. And we can drag the MIDI over from the previous instance of Serum and delete it. We can then open our new instance of Serum and solo the channel. Take oscillator A down by 2 octaves. Then from this drop-down menu, we can choose the basic mini and select the square wave. We'll also want to increase the unison to 7. Next, we'll change Serum to monophonic because we don't want multiple bass notes triggering at the same time. And we can add some glide as well. I'm going to push out the release a little bit and do the same for the attack, just to make sure there are no pops or clicks at the beginning or the end of the sound. So this is just an ESCI bass at the moment. So we're going to add the pitch modulation element. Open the modulation matrix. Choose LFO1 as the source from the drop-down menu here. We only want the LFO to trigger at the start of the sound, so make sure to change it to envelope mode. And we can shift this middle breakpoint to the left to create this ramp down sawtooth shape. In the destination drop-down, here, you want to choose master tuning from the global tab. Sometimes when you do this, the type arrow will change to a bidirectional arrow. We want to make sure it's the unidirectional arrow facing to the right. Now we can start to increase the amount. It sounds quite dramatic now, and using a lower rate for the LFO can work well if you want more of a bass drop. However, I'm looking for something a bit less dramatic, so I'm going to tweak the LFO and the amount until I get something closer to what I'm looking for. So this is the basic sound, but we're going to add a filter and some legato to add more movement and variation. We'll turn legato on, and we can go back to the oscillator window and initialize the filter. We can go to LFO2 and turn it to envelope mode, so it only triggers once per MIDI note. And we want to drag the central breakpoint to the right this time to create a sawtooth ramp up shape. Then we can drag LFO2 to the filter cutoff and tweak the LFO and the modulation amount to taste. Usually, I'll put the cutoff all the way to the right and drag the modulation amount part of the way back. If we look at the MIDI, the cool thing we can hear about the legato is that when at the end of bars 2 and 4, where the notes overlap, the filter doesn't re-trigger, and neither does the pitch envelope, which helps vary the texture and the tone of the bass. I will put a video on the screen that shows my approach to processing bass in more detail, but I'm going to move relatively fast here because I've covered this technique at length in other tutorials. I will leave an empty instrument rack in the description, as mentioned, so you can drag in this bass preset or any others. What we will be doing is replacing the sub-frequencies for the bass with a pure sine wave for consistency and splitting the frequencies using EQ3 so we can use multi-band distortion. So we can start by grouping Serum to itself and duplicating it within the channel. We can rename this to sub and this to top. Just going to ensure the sub is a pure sine wave. And we can start to drag in our EQ. We want to set the bands to 100s and 700 hertz. Drag this into the sub. Deactivate all the bands aside from the low one. Drag into the top. Activate the mids. Group it to itself. Duplicate it. Mids and high. Now we want to go back to the sub. And we want to compress the sine wave before the EQ. This just helps the sine wave be even more consistent. And we can add a mono utility to the mid band to help ensure the bass's mono compatibility. And we can also drag in an overdrive and tweak this to taste. Usually with basses, I will add an EQ8 and cut below 30 hertz just to remove any unwanted low frequencies. And I've also got some reverb on ascend. Maybe better to listen in the mix. As mentioned, this lead is essentially the same patch. We've got a slightly different amp envelope though, and slightly different pitch modulating LFO envelope, LFO1, and we've got no filter either. We've also got more reverb applied on the lead, and we've also got some delay, which is also on ascend. We've also got a different type of saturation, some EQ, and then I also usually use isotope alloy 2 and mono below 2 kilohertz to ensure the sounds are as mono compatible as possible. So this is already on the leads. I'm just dragging it over to the bass as well. And that's it. Remember, there are 3 free gifts in the description: the bass patch, the lead, and the bass processing rack. I hope you found this informative, and I'll see you next time.